Well, hey, everybody, we want to welcome you to ExL. We're really happy that you are here with us. Certainly nice to see a few faces out here, so that's cool. We're really thankful you guys can be here. And then for the other group of people, we just are appreciative that you can do this. Now, we're not going to do this forever, so don't get too comfortable with it. We want you to be able to come here and be with us, but we're glad that we have the technology to be able to do what we're doing right now, and we hope that you're excited to be here. We're certainly excited to have you here and very excited to have real people sitting in the audience. So thank you so much for being with us, guys. That's awesome. You know, we've got a variety of things that we're going to try and do tonight, just a whole bunch of different things. Andy's going to talk to us a little bit, and so we've got a variety of stuff that we want to do. So we're going to spend some time on that. I hope that's cool with you guys. The coronavirus stuff, get hopefully some questions and things, and try and continue to give you perspective and help you to understand how you want to approach this and what the best definition to be able to do that is going to be. So hopefully that's your intention to want to be here to do that, and we're excited to be doing that. Now we will get on with the words of wisdom out of the book of Proverbs, and so we'll continue to do that. So if you kind of hang tough, we got a bunch of stuff we want to try and do. We want to continue to remind you, be here on the weekends. We're still going to be going ahead, I think, at that 5:24 and 11:24 Saturday, Sunday. Going to continue to do that. And so as far as the live feed, again, we'll do that for a while, and then we're going to pull back from that when the most of the people can actually be here, guys, because philosophically we don't believe that that's the best choice. So please understand that sitting at home, we want to make sure that we're here as much as possible, but we have some alternatives if you simply cannot be here. So don't worry about that, but we want to get you back as quickly as we possibly can. So let's get going by praying. Father, we sure thank you for the opportunity to be here. I very much thank you for those who are sitting here. Father, it's so nice to kind of be over that where there's an empty auditorium, and so we thank you that you continue to move us in a great direction. I thank you for them. I thank you for the people sitting at home. I pray, Father, that the things that we're going to learn tonight will be helpful to us, and that we'll have an opportunity to laugh and enjoy some stuff and learn some things that will help us think a little bit about who we are and how we can live our life effectively for you. Father, we do pray for our nation. Just continue to ask for wisdom and direction for our president and vice president, for Stephen Miller, the speechwriter, for Mike Pompeo, for the people that are trying to take us a good direction, and also, Father, for our governors and our state's legislatures and all the different people that are involved in this. Father, we just pray for wisdom and direction so that they can make the choices that will be best, and that, Father, also that we'll stand up and be the people that we need to be, both the people of God, but also Americans. And I pray that through the process that we're doing that, and we're seeing that, kind of cool. I pray, Father, that really will have the impact you want it to have. So I thank you, Father, that we get this chance. I pray you'll guide us to learn some real important things today, and we thank you so much that we get a chance to be together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. One thing I thought was kind of interesting, I had someone send me a little thing today, and I wanted you to see this that I thought was wild. If you look at this, it says, notice from the Association of Psychiatrists, dear citizens, during the quarantine, it is considered normal to talk to your plants and pets. Kindly contact us only if they reply. Thank you. And I thought, yeah, that pretty much fits. That's kind of where we are with that. I wanted to start by kind of updating you on something that I thought was kind of interesting that you may or may not have known about. On Sunday, we got the opportunity, if you were here, you're aware of this. If not, let me fill you in, that we discovered that there was a person out here taking pictures of people in the parking lot and as they drove out and taking those pictures. And so, you know, we wondered what that was all about. Turns out it was a photog. It was a photographer for, was it? Thank you, Arizona Daily Star. Okay, there you go, Arizona Daily Star. And interestingly enough, the reporter was over at East, and so we didn't know all that was happening, but that's what ended up taking place. So that was wild, and actually, you know, you took the water out to him, right? Yep, so you did all that, and so we did some stuff with that. What made it really interesting is when I was told that the police were here and they needed to talk to me. And so it's like, awesome, this is getting really fascinating. So, you know, we had communion, did all that. And so then it was time for me to go talk to the police in my office. And what was really clever, what we found out was that someone watching online, apparently for this purpose, had reported me because I got as close as 2 feet to somebody. I know. And so anyway, the wild thing about this that I thought was really funny is that the police officer who showed up goes to our church. Yeah, it's a she. She's awesome. And not only did she go to our church, but she had been here Saturday night for church. But she came to do her job, which I thought was great, and I knew that she had to do that. And so we sat down and had the interview. And she said, I need to do this, and so I'm just going to hit this button, and I'm going to record all of this, which I thought was great because I needed to make sure that I was talking to whoever was going to listen to this. And so she asked about why we were meeting, and I went through the process of talking about why we were able to do that and specifically what we were doing. And I pointed out the fact that we have the right, and even biblical right, for civil disobedience. And so I said to whoever's listening, I kept talking to a recorder, whoever's listening there, that we have that right. The Bible's full of the concept of civil disobedience when the government does what they should not do, specifically against God's truth. However, this was not that. I pointed out that we were a part of the essential services, and so because of that, we could have been meeting the entire 6 weeks that we had stepped out. That legally we had that right, and the essential services gave us that right. What we had done is we had chosen for those 6 weeks to step back from that based on Romans chapter 13. So I described that for whoever's listening and described that for them, what that was as far as obeying your governing authorities, understanding that they were trying, we believed, to do the best for society, and so we wanted to be a part of that process. So then my next step was, however, here's the place that we've come to at this point. Now we have a lot of facts. We have a lot of proof. This isn't based, I talked about the faulty models that are there, and so because we have those facts, we know that what's going on now is not justified by the facts, and we have First Amendment rights. Now, I told her, again, what the First Amendment rights, I told whoever was listening, what those First Amendment rights were. It occurs to me, we talk about this an awful lot, and I'm not certain that we ever just take the time to read it, so I thought, let's read it. Here's what we're talking about. First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that's the First Amendment right. So you've got freedom of religion, you've got freedom of speech, you've got freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom for redress of grievances against the government. So you've got a 5-step process there for the First Amendment. So I pointed out both the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and also the freedom of assembly. And what I said, and I did say very specifically, I said to whoever's listening, I kept saying that, she kept chuckling as I do that, but whoever's listening there, you have no right to do what you're demanding of us right now. And the Constitution is what is the foundation of our society, and so what's happening there is that you can only do what you're able to do should the government allow you to treat us that way, okay? So that's what's happening. So thus far, we've all allowed that to happen. But the problem is there's no basis, this is what I told them, there's no basis for what the governor has done, where all of a sudden he's actually threatening, he's not giving guidance, but instead threatening businesses with 6 months in jail, $2,500 fines. There's no such thing that makes that okay, and so that's not going to be acceptable, and that's why we're exercising our First Amendment freedoms that cannot be taken from us, because just as it tells us about in the Declaration of Independence, these are inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are given to us by God, not by you, and therefore you're not allowed to take those away. So because she had to do her job, she said, okay, well, part of what I see around here is the first thing is, what they talked about, and that is that you got as close as 2 feet to somebody. So will you be staying 6 feet away? And I said, no, I won't. Okay. Said, okay, well then, how about the food court? I noticed up in the food court, now it looks like the tables are separated and everything, but that's a food court. I said, actually, it's not a food court. We don't really need a food court here. Nothing personal, Valerie. Let me finish what I'm saying here. We think it's very important, okay? I said, when we put that in place, it was because we wanted to provide an excuse for ministry. The entire purpose of that food court is because we want people to get together. We want people to sit and break bread, to be around each other. And I said, so that's an extension of our ministry, and so we're going to continue to do that. Afterwards, actually, Jake pointed out something great. He was like, how is that any different than Freddy's or any fast food restaurant? I'm like, oh, that would have been a good thing to say, but I didn't say it. So we went through the process and did all of that. I did go ahead through this because I knew that this was probably important for whoever was listening. I said, you need to understand that we're not going to give up our rights. but we also have legal representation lined up, and we're ready to fight this right through court if we have to do this, should this be pursued any further. So that was the discussion. It was polite. It went really, really well. She was awesome, so it was all great. Well, what I thought was funny, and Kim and I were chuckling about it, is about, it must have been somewhere around 3:30 that afternoon. So Sunday afternoon, we got a call from this officer. And she said, I wanted to call you because I was asked by the chief of police at Marana to make you aware that he said, I personally wanted to make sure you were aware that should there be any more complaints about the Bridge Christian Church, or for that matter, any other church, the Marana Police Department will not be pursuing that because we know that you have your First Amendment rights. Boom, mic drop. Yeah. So that's pretty cool, all right? That was a pretty cool moment. That all went well, and so I was telling Kim, let's go ahead and take me away, and you see what happens as everybody surrounds the jail. I mean, that's what has to happen. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, guys, because I would like you at all the locations and the people at home, and I don't know if I even said hello East, and I'm sorry about that if I didn't say that, but we're thrilled that you're there as well. I really want you to pray about this, guys, because I cannot tell you how heartened I am and how thrilled I am, because we are seeing the American people stand up and go, oh, no, you didn't. I mean, there's a sense of that happening right now, because what's taking place is that if you look around at the protests that you're seeing happen, when they're told they can't go to the beach, and they go to the beach anyway. I don't know if you heard about the couple sheriffs here in Arizona who went, nope, we're not going to do what the governor is saying here. That's not legal for us to do that. Andy sent me something just a minute ago where he said that the Riverside County, California sheriff, which has 2.5 million people that they serve, said he will not enforce, he just did this today, the lockdown measures from Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, guys, you have to understand is that this is what a representative republic looks like. This is how it's supposed to be. What happens is that the governed are the ones, if you remember, the reason for American exceptionalism is because we're the one government that has emphasized the citizen over the government. That our Declaration of Independence and then our Constitution is based on limited government. And guys, we have to be willing to stand up and recognize that when things go from being suggestions of how we should behave to orders and threats, that we say, nope, that's not okay. The governed, by definition, are the ones in charge. And so we have to remember that, and we have to be willing to stand to do that. And I got to tell you, it's awesome to watch that happen. And I really would hope that you would pray, maybe continue to pray, maybe you're already doing this, that we continue to see more and more of this in places that are trying to take away those rights that are ours, that are given to us by God. All right? That's the foundation of American exceptionalism, and therefore that becomes an important thing. I also want to show you a couple things that become important too. This was actually on the CDC Facebook page, and so I wanted you to see this. And I wanted you to emphasize right here where it actually said, this was about 3 or 4 days ago, where it says, similar to what has been seen during a comparable time period during a recent high severity flu season. So talking about COVID-19, it just made the statement that it's similar to the flu. Now, I don't know if you remember that. I mean, this happened with President Trump. When he said that, they freaked out. But other people who have said that or tried to compare that, and they're freaking out, and they're finding out that the really kind of danger that we see with this is very comparable to what we see in the flu, and so that becomes an important thing. Now, for, this is lots of weeks, 6 or 7 weeks now, you've listened to me talk about all this stuff, and you may be wondering, where's Dr. Andy? I mean, he is a physician after all, and he can talk to this stuff much more effectively than I can. And so he finally decided that he'd go ahead and talk. And so he recorded some stuff for us to be aware of a little bit. So it's about 7 minutes long, but at all the locations and at home, I'd like you to listen. He's got some things he wanted to share after going through all this stuff. So, Andy, to you.
Well, hey, you guys. Hey, I want to talk to you a little bit about the coronavirus, but from my perspective, which is a little bit unique because I'm both a physician, so I get the medical side of things, but I'm also a patient, guys. I have chronic illness. I have a disease called dysautonomia. It's significant. It's a severe disease. It causes me a whole bunch of problems. And when we talk about coronavirus affecting more severely people with underlying conditions, guys, that's me. I'm at risk. And it's not just coronavirus, it's anything I catch. I'm not going to do well with that. And because of that, I'm actually kind of a germaphobe. I'm a lot of germaphobe, and a lot of people are aware of that. I'm constantly running around with my hand sanitizer here. You know, if I ever shake somebody's hand or even a fist pump, I'll quickly, put some hand sanitizer on. Or if I touch something that I know other people have touched, I'll put hand sanitizer on. I'm careful about not touching my hands to my face or anything like that. And, the whole social distancing thing kind of cracks me up. I've been doing it for 17 years. I'm real careful about where I go, how close I get to people, certain situations. And guys, it's not because I'm crazy, like Howard Hughes type thing with bugs type stuff. It's because I know if I get something, I'm not going to do well with it. I'm just being careful about it. So with that in mind, guys, knowing that I've got a chronic illness, I'm a physician, and I'm sort of a germaphobe because of all of this stuff, how has this coronavirus affected me? Guys, I can tell you this. I am no more or no less concerned than I normally am. With or without coronas, it doesn't change anything. Now you may be saying, oh, so is Dr. Andy saying coronavirus isn't a big deal? Guys, no, it is a big deal. If I got it, I probably would not do very well with it. But it's because it's just another thing that's out there. Guys, look, I'm an emergency room radiologist. I've been doing it for over 20 years. I have been looking inside people's lungs, not literally, but on chest CTs. When they show up into the emergency room, I look inside their lungs, and guys, tons of problems with infectious respiratory things are going on all the time. And they're breathing it in and they're breathing it out. And guys, many of these things are a lot more dangerous than coronavirus. I'm making you feel very good about things now, aren't we? And some may say, well, those just aren't very common, so, not a big deal. Guys, look, some of them are very common, but even if you're going to go down that direction, guys, what about influenza? If we're going to take the position, we're going to lock ourselves down out of fear because of coronavirus, guys, do you know you have to do that 9 out of every 12 months of the year because of influenza virus? Guys, influenza hits somewhere around September and goes through May. And I can tell you guys, influenza can be nasty. If someone like me and someone with chronic illness or an elderly person gets influenza, they oftentimes don't do very well with it. It is a significant virus, just like coronavirus. Well, what's worse, corona or influenza? Guys, I can tell you, when corona first hit, I was freaking out. They were talking about a 3.7% case fatality rate, because that's horrible. Almost 4 out of 100 people die if they get coronavirus. Guys, that's turned out to not even be close, not even in the ballpark close. Now that we have facts and now that we actually have data, the experts are all saying that it's somewhere in the ballpark of a severe influenza. Some say corona's a little worse, some say it's a little better, but it's in the general ballpark of a severe influenza. Guys, that's not making light of anything. Severe influenza is a bad actor, especially for people like me. But my point is this, guys, if we're going to lock ourselves down over coronavirus and fear, guys, we've got to lock ourselves down every single year. And I know some people say, oh, influenza is different because there's a vaccine. Guys, on a good year, that vaccine is maybe 50 to 60% effective. And the point is this, guys, for someone like me with chronic health conditions, I'm not going to live my life in fear, because if I did, I would always have to be this way. And if I lived my life in fear and I was locking myself down all the time, guys, it would be devastating for me. The degree of depression and anxiety would be overwhelming for me. And guys, I can tell you there are millions of Americans that are so depressed and so anxious because of everything that this is doing. And that depression and anxiety is going to lead to some horrible health consequences. It's not good. On top of that, I would be an emotional wreck if I was locking myself down. And spiritually, guys, I need to be at church. God tells us the importance of being around God's people. There's just such power on that. And if I couldn't do that, I'd be absolutely miserable. So guys, I'm simply not going to go there. Now, please understand what I am and I am not saying here. Guys, I am not saying, oh, let's just, for people like me that are sick, let's just throw caution to the wind, go out and pretend like there's not a threat out there. Because I'm not saying that at all. That's not how I live as a physician. I'm careful. It's all about balance here. Guys, I'm careful. I have certain precautions that I put in that I mentioned about. I think they're reasonable. Some people think it's a little over the top, but they're reasonable. But guys, we don't want to go to that other extreme either that says we're just going to lock ourselves down. We're going to hide away in fear, because I promise you that's devastating. It will devastate you if you do that. Now, some people may say, Andy, I don't know how to break out of this. I am so freaked out over this whole thing. I don't know how to break out of this. Guys, I can almost assure you, if that's the case for you, you're probably watching too much media. Guys, when this first thing hit, that was that way with me. I was watching media, I was watching the news, and they would show this stuff, and most of it is hype and hysteria, but it was freaking me out, so I had to finally stop watching that. And guys, not just that, social media. Social media, people are posting things, and it would just, I'd look at it and it would just freak me out, and most of it's just not true. Yes, I have unfollowed a number of people because of that, because it's not good for me. And guys, if you're struggling with this fear, guys, stay away from that media. It's just not good for you. Tune out of it. Instead, focus on the facts, focus on the truth, focus what's out there. And when you do that, guys, I think it's going to lead you to that right balance. We don't want to throw caution to the wind and just pretend it's not there. But guys, we also cannot live in fear and hide ourselves away, because that will be absolutely devastating. It's all about that right balance. Guys, I really do hope this was helpful for you. And thank you so much, guys. We'll see you.
All right, thank you, Andy. We appreciate that. Is it just me, or does it look like he just got a haircut? You noticed that too. Where did he get a haircut? Okay, what's going on there? All right. All right, I want to talk to you, if I can, a little bit. We haven't really talked much about this, and I want to try and address this, and that's the issue of China. I want to make sure that we understand some facts and some truths about China. It's real probable that if you're paying attention to what's going on around us, you probably keep hearing about the wet markets, all right, and all this stuff. And so it's kind of interesting that through the concept of the wet markets, we develop a view, and I want to make sure that we're going to have some clarity with that. So first of all, I want to just show you just a few pictures of the wet markets. We're going to give you a chance to look at the bunnies, and okay, and little snout there. And you notice the eels or whatever, snakes or whatever, and turtle, and yep. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that we hear stuff like that, and it's not an uncommon thing, is that we start to think about the wet markets in Wuhan and what it's like, and it's really common for us to immediately assume we're talking about some backwater town, and this dumb wet market and all the things going on, and juices dripping down, and viruses and all that. You're just like, ew, this is disgusting. Guys, Wuhan is a city of 11 million people. It's the 41st largest city in the world. And so I thought it might be helpful, because we're not getting a very good perspective on what this is really like over there. But what you're seeing there in the wet markets is what happens with communism, trying to feed people when you don't have capitalism to be able to drive it. And that's why we end up with things like that. But the city of Wuhan, you might brace yourself to be a little surprised. Here you go. So you get an opportunity to see a vast difference between the poor and the wealthy and what it's like. I mean, guys, this is a major city. It's larger than New York proper. This is a very large, very well-developed, very sophisticated city. Along with that, you've heard about very close to the Wuhan wet markets that they have there, the biotech lab that this thing walked out of, and so I thought you should see that in case you, yep, there it is. That's the probable ground zero where all of this started and where all of this came from, okay? So it's a very prominent lab. Unfortunately, it's one of those high-end labs that doesn't have the security that it needs to be able to resolve some of the things that we've seen. This is not the first pandemic that we've seen happen that came from China. It's at least the third. And so, guys, this is kind of something that happens on a fairly regular basis. Now, I wanted to tell you all that because I wanted to read a couple things and point out some things that may be helpful, because this needs to change our relationship with China if America is going to be what we need to be. This is actually just from yesterday from the Washington Examiner. Someone sent it to me today. It's an editorial article. It says this: a Department of Homeland Security analyst has concluded that China hid the early spread of the coronavirus so that it could hoard medical equipment, keeping it from other countries that could have bought it if they had known the danger that was coming their way from Wuhan. Specifically, DHS found with 95% statistical confidence that changes to China's personal protective equipment import and export behavior were highly abnormal and not random. Early warnings from China about the scale of the coronavirus outbreak and its threat of becoming a pandemic could have given other countries time to take action that would have saved lives. It looks like the Chinese government deliberately misled the world so that it could stockpile crucial supplies. For those of us who have been chronicling China on the coronavirus for months, this revelation is not surprising, but it certainly is outrageous. China's lies are piling up rapidly. It lied about the virus being capable of transmission from humans. It threw whistleblower doctors in prison. It refused to let the World Health Organization and other authorities, such as the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, see early data. It stopped tests and test samples destroyed. It allowed its citizens to travel. Don't miss this. It allowed its citizens to travel from Wuhan to other parts of the world, taking the disease with them, and then had the gall to complain when foreign nations belatedly restricted travel from China. The tyranny continues to restrict international scientific access to Wuhan, and it sells faulty coronavirus tests, masks, and protective equipment across the globe. This suffering is the shame of Chinese President Xi Jinping. We do not believe the virus is a again, this is an editorial. We do not believe the virus is a manufactured bioweapon gone wrong, or that China deliberately let it leak from its probable source, a research lab in Wuhan, which I just showed you. But it did deliberately deceive the world and did deliberately let the virus infect the rest of the world, either as the primary aim or secondary result of disgraceful policy decisions. We, by which we mean the rest of the world, are all in this against Communist China regime. The United States federal government's commitment to righteous truth must go before words. Beijing is dedicated to concealing whatever it can still hide about the coronavirus malfeasance, working overtime to bury data, hide relevant scientists, and distort scientific facts. And then just today, the AP came out to add to that. This is not a part of the editorial. It says the AP just came out and said that if China had notified the world even 1 week sooner, it would have cut the world's infections by 2/3. I want you to think about that, because, I mean, worldwide right now, we would be looking at a saving probably of lives of about 170,000 people worldwide. All right, and then you can just do the math. 75, we'd probably be looking at somewhere about 50,000 people in America. All right, that would be tens of thousands less people dead, but they didn't do it. Now, I want to make a comment here, because sometimes we forget to look back at what people have said and what people have done. And so this is really just for the record that I think it needs to be said. You've probably not heard of this person. Maybe you have. This person right here is Jennifer Rubin. She called herself a conservative. The reality is she's not. She is a never-Trumper. And what's interesting is that she has said some very specific things. And never-Trumper is just someone who, I mean, absolutely hates the president no matter what. I mean, he basically is fulfilling everything she said she dedicated her life to, and she hates that. Here's what she said. She said that the GOP, so the Republican Party, is a, quote, death cult for allegedly, quote, resisting science on the Wuhan coronavirus. Now, I want to make sure you understand, guys, that it was in fact the Democrats that absolutely freaked out, if you remember, when President Trump on January 30th issued the travel ban from China. I mean, absolutely freaked out. They said, in fact, that he was, if you remember, racist, xenophobic, and attacked him for this completely unreasonable thing that he did. In addition to that, now again, that was January 30th. In addition to that, Nancy Pelosi, the head of the Democrats, this is February 24th. This is 3 weeks or so, a little over that. She was down in Chinatown, there in San Francisco, and she said this. She said, please come and visit and enjoy Chinatown. So all that time after, that's what she ended up saying. All right, please come down here while this virus is going on. She encouraged people to do that. I think then she ate some expensive ice cream, something like that. Then, going back now to Jennifer Rubin, let's talk about her. Now, I'm going to say this just because these are the facts. Just want you to hear the facts. Now, remember what she said. People who are conservatives, all right, in the Republican Party, let's say, I would be one of those, that those people were part of this death state. We're a bunch, and she made the statement that we're a bunch of rubes that are stupidly going to end up killing everybody else in the country. She even made the statement because we'll probably go to a Trump rally or something, and we'll get it, and we'll spread it everywhere, and we'll kill all the other people because we're so stupid. And the word rubes, I think, is funny because her last name is Rubin. But it's interesting that I just want to give you the facts. Now, I'm going to give you a conclusion after this, so hang tough with me at all the locations and all the people, okay? The facts are this. If you want to do blue state, red state, did you know that if, in fact, you lived in a blue state, you are over 3 times more likely to die from the coronavirus? It's like 3.14. If someone objects and says, well, New York, okay, I took New York out. If we take New York out of the picture, you are still, if you live in a blue state, all right, a liberal state instead of a Republican state, a red state, you are now, taking New York out, 2.5 times more likely to die from the coronavirus. And so the rubes, that means idiots, all right? The rubes, Miss Rubin, are not the ones killing us off. Now, I'm not trying to say that the virus has taken a political position. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that the very thing she said is the exact opposite of what the facts actually relay. That it's actually safer to live in the red states by far than the blue states. Now, one thing I want you to do, and I want you to think about this. Andy talked a little bit about the fear aspect of this, and so we'll do this and take a couple questions. But I wanted to read something for you because I want to make sure that we get that. And certainly for some of you that perhaps are at home right now, maybe you're feeling, some of this stuff where you're, just feeling anxious and a lot of anxiety. Maybe all of you are feeling a little bit of this. And I want to remind you of something that happened that I thought was, this is in 2 Kings chapter 6. Starts in verse 8. It's the basis for our song when I wrote that behind the scenes. But I want you to hear it because I think there's something to be said for us there. So just listen. Again, it's 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning in verse 8. It says, now the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. The king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told them. Thus he warned him, so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. Now the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, will you tell me which of us is for the king of Israel? One of his servants said, no, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who in Israel tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. So he said, go and see where he is, that I might send and take him. And he told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. And he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now when the attendant of the man of God had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? And so he answered him, as Elisha said this, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. You got to know at that moment that servant's going, did you hit your head with a coconut or something? What happened here? You okay? What do you mean? Look at all these people. Then it says, then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike these people with blindness, I pray, so that he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now the story goes on that he actually took him into the city of Samaria. They were right in the middle of the enemy's camp, that everything that this huge army thought that they were going to accomplish, the exact opposite happened. And here's why I bring this up. Guys, I get it that it's very easy for us to give in to fear, but you have to realize that certainly as Americans, we typically don't do that. But even more so as Christians, that we have an opportunity to be able to sit back and recognize that we have a relationship with that God, the God who did that, the God who had to say, just so you don't miss this, there's a whole bunch going on behind the scenes that you don't see. That when that servant saw those horses and chariots of fire encircling that army wasn't that big of a deal all of a sudden. Guys, that's where we have to be. You have to understand, and I get it, that we're going to find ourselves in situations that are going to be scary and difficult. But you have to realize that this is an opportunity for us to know that we don't fear. The Bible says that we don't grieve as those who have no hope. We don't fear as those who have no hope either. That we're very different in this because we know that God is working on our behalf. And here's the thing I want you to think about. It's interesting in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, it says, for God causes all things to work together for good to those who love him and to those who are called according to his purpose. Guys, you have to understand that that's us. And all things includes the coronavirus and the things going on. It includes this nightmarish, I think, mistake of shutting everything down and all the things that we have done. So I want to challenge you at all the locations. I want to challenge you at home and here. Are you praying very specifically about how God may use this whole thing that's taken place, ultimately for his glory, his honor, and for the betterment of the nation in which his people are trying to be his people? For instance, let me give you an illustration of that. I am very, very thankful for Donald Trump. I think I've made that clear. I'm very thankful because of the positions that he's taken and what he's done for this nation. I think it's awesome what God has done through this man. I, however, have no illusions about the man, Donald Trump. He's got stuff, all right? And you know what? I don't have to tell you what the stuff is. He wears it on his sleeve. You see it all the time, all right? I will always be thankful for this guy, but here's the thing I do know. I'm concerned, for instance, that if we had a landslide election, I'm not sure he could take it. Meaning, if we had a Reagan-type election where 49 states voted him into office, I'm concerned. I don't know if he would have the humility necessary to be able to take that kind of a mandate. Is it possible that, just maybe, God's going to use this to be able to keep him in the right place? And I think it's got to be right in that right sweet spot for him to be able to be as great as he has been in religious liberty. It was 3 years ago today that he signed in the religious liberty that we have and to give us protection that we were losing left and right. That the reality is that would he use this to help that man, that flawed man, we're all flawed, but that flawed man, to be able to stay right where he has been staying to continue to do extraordinary things? Guys, what we have to understand is God could be working through what Satan threw at us in very specific ways. But my question is, are you praying about that? Are you asking God to utilize this for the world to see their need more effectively for God and how fragile life really is? For those in your sphere of influence that you may get a chance to make a difference with. Are you praying for our leaders? And I mean specifically praying, God, is this something you can use for the heart of our president? Because we can all lose our way. Guys, the last thing we want him to do is care what Washington thinks of him. If that ever happens, it's over. It's over, because that's what all the presidents before him have done. They've lost their way. This guy is great because he doesn't care. It's awesome. He's not there to impress anybody. He doesn't care. He just wants to get the job done. Pray for him and pray that these type of things will lead him where he needs to be. And it will cause our Senate and our Congress to be different. The people who are voting and all the elements that are going to be there. And guys, obviously, that this will also lead to the right direction. I need you to understand again that should we end up with someone like a Joe Biden or whoever would actually be doing it behind the scenes, guys, we're in some deep trouble. the idea of socialism, the idea of losing our way as a country, religious freedom gone. I mean, guys, just think about where we already were. Remember, they were the ones in 2016 that took God off their platform completely. And so the danger that is there is huge. And so I really want you to pray about this, but pray about what we see happening as it relates to the difference that it ultimately might be able to be making. Because God may be up there going, watching Satan do all this garbage and even all the stuff going on there going, I got this. All right, that all we need to do is we need to look behind and see what's really going on behind the scenes and pray that God will utilize that. Because remember, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. We need to make sure, guys, that's our focus to be able to see this happen. All right, we're going to do a couple questions. Even though it's later, I want to make sure we have at least a few of those to do, so let's get going on those. All right, first of all, being a Christian, I am held responsible for what I know. I've recently learned that since the 70s, vaccines have been using aborted fetal cells. How does God feel about vaccines in general? Since he created us with amazing immune systems and as Christians, should we decline vaccines that contain aborted fetal cells? Also, how should we respond if we face mandatory vaccines? I would love to tell you that I know about this. I've never heard that. So I'm kind of ignorant on that part of it. I would say that if in fact they are involved in any part of an aborted baby, not fetus, but an aborted baby, I would say absolutely not. I would have no interest in that. Just so you know, guys, even in the area of stem cell research, if you're not aware of this, we have yet to have any benefit from aborted baby stem cell research. None. Now, when it comes to adult stem cell research, huge amounts of benefit that we've been able to have. And so we don't have to go there to make that take place. As far as vaccines, I think you're right. God has given us the ability in a very broken world to find ways to be able to resolve certain vaccines. I think sometimes we forget about, you remember when you were, I remember the polio, and smallpox, and all the different vaccines that have honestly changed our world, guys. We've been able to eradicate a number of diseases that were decimating the human race, decimating it. And so it's very difficult to look at that reality of vaccine and think that that's a negative thing. As far as being involved in vaccines, I know that there's some debate about that, and some argumentation that goes on with that. We vaccinated our children, so we went through the process of doing that. I can at least tell you that. And as far as the aborted part, I don't know. Next question. Are we allowed to fellowship on church grounds right now under Ducey's order, such as potluck nights or volleyball games, since we are allowed to gather for church? All right, first of all, quit fellowshipping. Don't really care for that. It's kind of a church word. So you mean, are you able to hang out? Let's go with that. Are we able to hang out to do all that? Guys, we are fully back. We are doing all of the ministries that we have and all the things that we're involved with. And so the reality is we are an essential service. The things that we do are ministry, and that based on that, have at it. All right, we want to be able to do this. Now, don't get me wrong, and I think Andy made a good point. We're not trying to be stupid about this. And so certainly, if you're in a situation where you've got certain underlying conditions that need to be dealt with, and it may be very wise for you not to be here for a while, and we get that. We understand all that, and we want to keep you safe, and we'll do everything we can to be able to help you to still get what you need, through technology, as long as we can, make that happen. But yes, as far as getting involved in all that stuff, please feel free to do the usual things that you're doing. Our fitness classes are kicking up. We're doing all our stuff again. As we already said, we don't really agree that this even happened at all. We went along, we did what we needed to do. We feel good that we did all that, but we're back, and we're going to exercise our rights to do that. And so, yeah, let's get all the ministry going that we possibly can to make that work. All right, so we've done all that, guys, and yeah, that took us a while, but okay, we're going to go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about some wisdom from the book of Proverbs to understand this. Once again, just as a reminder, the book of Solomon was written by Solomon. You got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, as we've said. The key one there, when he was elderly, turned his back on God, Ecclesiastes, turned back to God at the end of that. When he was younger, Song of Solomon, first married. Proverbs is that sweet spot. We get an opportunity to see the practical nature of what he's laid out there, primarily because he's talking to his son, and so it's amazing that 3,000 years later, the stuff that he says is so practical to our life and really helpful to enable us to do that. We always talk about like God is in the cab, and he is seeing what we cannot see to give us the direction to know what we should or should not do. Wealthiest guy and the wisest guy that ever lived, and so that's the guy that we're talking about, and it's significant to be able to understand that. Now, if you remember, we finished in Proverbs chapter 18. We made it through the first 2 verses. I want to go ahead and read those for you again, just to be able to back up a little bit, just briefly mention it, and then we'll go on. Proverbs chapter 18, verses 1 and 2 says this: "He who separates himself seeks his own desire. He quarrels against all sound wisdom. A fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind." If you remember there, the concept that he was trying to get them, I mean, talk about social distancing. Here you go. And he looks at this and says we have to be careful, because when we separate ourselves, the idea is that we're doing that primarily from a selfish standpoint. We counsel, therefore, against all sound wisdom. Ultimately, we think that we're right about everything because there's nobody to ever tell us that we're wrong. Fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind. And honestly, we've got to be a little bit careful with this, because technology can kind of lead, if you will, the next generation to kind of behave this way, to kind of separate themselves and think that they're always right and just block anybody who disagrees with them. And so we need to make sure that's not a part of what we do. Now, the next section is verses 3 through 9, so it's a big section. So I want you to listen to the whole thing, but I want you specifically to take note of how much he's talking. Once again, now think of it, this is Solomon, and how many times he's come back to this, but he's talking about what we say. All right, so look at the big picture of this, verses 3 through 9. He says, "But when a wicked man comes, contempt also comes, and with dishonor comes reproach. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. To show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment. A fool's lips bring strife, and his mouth calls for blows. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, and they go down in the innermost parts of the body. He also who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys." Now I want you to see through the whole process there, guys. He's trying to give us a sense and an understanding of how this thing works, all right? So he starts talking specifically in verse 3 about a wicked man comes, contempt also comes, and with dishonor comes reproach. So the idea, you've got 2 things there. You've got a wicked, so let's say wicked person, to get a wicked person or someone who is dishonorable, and that should lead to 2 things, contempt and reproach. Now his point is this, is that by nature, when we see wickedness or dishonor, we should have a revulsion against that. There's a natural, ooh, that's not good, all right, that we want to pull away from that. And so the natural tendency is that wickedness causes us to pull away. We don't want to be a part of that. Now, I want you to see how he then turns around and makes a contrast there to help us to see this. All right, we should be drawn to certain people, repelled by others. He says, "The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook." So he's contrasting the concept of this individual that is wicked and shows dishonor, that automatically repels people. Now think about it. He's talking to his son. He's talking to his son who will be king probably someday, who therefore needs to know how to relate to people in an effective way. And so he turns around and he says, "In the words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook." So what he's trying to say there is that the one side of the contempt that you have of the wicked, the dishonorable, is so superficial. Doing what they want to do, the way they want to do it, coming at you the way that they are. But the reality of wisdom is to go a little bit deeper, to have something going on under the surface. And that bubbling brook means that it's something that resides within us, something that we can pull out, that we can utilize at any point. And so we're supposed to, and in his case with him, then we have these deep waters, this bubbling brook, and we develop wisdom to be able to avoid being that wicked person or dishonorable that brings about contempt and reproach. Now, verse 5. "To his son, to show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment." Now, guys, what you have going on here is a reality of what happens in our society. By and large, it's kind of like this. You could pretty much narrow it down to high school. If you think about who were the cool kids in high school, were they the ones that always did their homework and obeyed their parents and didn't cuss and drove the speed limit, and those were not the cool kids, were they? Just not how it was. I mean, if you're going to be cool, I mean, it's like you're giving the finger to the world, doing whatever you want, and the cool kids were partying and the drugs and the alcohol and the sleeping around, and that was considered to be the group, all right? That was the cool kids. Guys, you have to realize that nothing's really changed. The same thing is taking place in our world now, and you basically have that concept of no truth, no God, do whatever you want, liberalism type stuff, as opposed to right and wrong and how we ought to behave and how we ought to treat people, etc. And through the process of that, what's happened is now those who are wicked are shown partiality, which is exactly what's not supposed to happen, and you thrust aside the righteous in judgment. Now think about it. The things that we would try and say that are right and good are the very things that are attacked all over our society, aren't they? I mean, and interestingly enough, the way that they're attacked, if they don't agree with God, they say that you taking that position makes you a hater. You're a hater. Or somehow you're afraid of it. You're phobic in some ways. And so they've taken the language and they've changed it for this purpose, all right, so that they can show partiality to the wicked. Psalm says don't do that. He knew where that led. This is where we are in our society. And it thrusts aside the righteous in judgment. It says that you are unacceptable. Let's just think about, guys, just the idea. It's just an amazing thing. The term tolerant. I had one of the teens came in today and was doing a book report. And he's doing a book report for school and needed to talk to me about why we were non-denominational. So we went through the whole thing of doing all that. And he said that one of the things that his professor had said to him is that typically speaking, when you're talking about non-denominational churches, is because they're more tolerant of other church belief systems. He said, would you say that that's true? And I said, well, first of all, no. I said, because you used the word tolerant, and I'm sorry, tolerant is a really good word, but it's been so bastardized that the reality is nope, no can do. Can't use that term. Because tolerant doesn't mean tolerant anymore. But the reality is it means this. You either kowtow to what I believe, or I will squish you under my foot. And somehow that's become tolerant. So the shocking level of intolerance, the term tolerance is amazing. And then I pointed out that by definition, what your professor is saying is that churches are kind of there to steal other church members. I think about they're more tolerant of the others, and they can therefore reach out to those. And we said we're really trying to reach the world in our sphere of influence, and so there's really not a part of that what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the world, by reaching other people and do that in an effective way. So you think of how misused that concept has been. Now, why has it been used that way? Because they try and take, and this is something that's so frustrating, and this is how this works, you change the language, and all of a sudden, instead of someone who is morally opposed to an immoral act, you're a hater or you're phobic. Instead of someone who says, well, I follow God based on the facts and based on what God has said over and over and over in the Bible, that is considered to be a sinful act, one that will send you to hell. You're intolerant. No, not being intolerant. Well, you can say God's being intolerant if you want to, but the reality is no, all I'm doing is I'm taking a position, the right position that I had the right to take based on my First Amendment rights. And so this is how you get there, guys. And so here he is, now think about it, talking to his son, who's going to lead Israel, and he makes sure he understands, listen, if you're going to be involved in this and you're going to show partiality to the wicked, now why would he do that? I mean, think about it. To show partiality to the wicked is not good. Why would you do that? Well, first of all, let's look at our society. Why do they do that in Washington? What is the thing I just said about President Donald Trump? The one thing we never want him to do is care what Washington thinks of him. Guys, you have to realize that once they get into the Beltway there in Washington, for an awful lot of them, they actually believe that the rest of the country is what the Beltway thinks. Oh my gosh, nothing could be further from the truth. And so what you have to realize is the reason they do it is, first of all, people care what other people think about them. That's one of the things. And so they can show partiality to the wicked. Second thing is, we're talking about a thing, if you're talking about Washington, you're talking about a thing called politics. And we all know politics is just awesome. Hate politics. It's horrible. And you guys, I don't just mean typical politics. You can see it. Don't you hate it when people politic you in your personal life, in your relational life? You do this for, the whole, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. So now we're into the whole idea of getting what we want by making trades of certain things that are there, which leads to the third thing, and that is bribes. And you think about it. He's sitting there, and someone says, hey, I can do this for you. I'll give you this money. I'll give you this land. I'll give you whatever. And the next thing you know is the wicked doesn't look quite as wicked because I'm kind of getting what I want. Doing that, if we show preferential treatment, partiality to the wicked, it will lead to, therefore, as it says here, thrusting aside the righteous in judgment. Now, I want to show you, and it's kind of interesting. I'm sure you've heard this story, but I don't know if you've actually read it before. I want to read this for you. And this was something that Solomon went through that I just thought was wild. So here you go. This is going to be 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 16. It says, then two women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. And one woman said, oh, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. And it happened on the third day after I gave birth that this woman also gave birth to a child, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, only the two of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on it. It's a horrible, tragic situation. And so she arose in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead son in my bosom. When I rose in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. But when I looked at him carefully in the morning, behold, he was not my son, whom I had born. And the other woman said, no, for the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. But the first woman said, no, for the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. Now, can you imagine being put in that situation? All right, first of all, you got prostitutes and going over this, and so you got all this stuff going on, and now all of a sudden, well, this one's dead. No, it's my kid. No, it's my kid. All right? So, and this was one of the things that went everywhere when people heard that Solomon did this. Verse 23, it says, then the king said, the one says, this is my son who is living, and your son is the dead one. And the other one says, no, for your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one. The king said, give me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Then the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, for she was deeply stirred over her son, and said, oh, my lord, give her the living child, for by no means kill him. But the other one said, he shall be neither mine nor yours, divide him. And the king answered and said, give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother. When all Israel heard the judgment which the king had handed down, they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Now, guys, what's interesting, based on what we're seeing here, again, is the interesting thing that Solomon was able to look at this situation, and a situation that he knew wasn't okay. These were two prostitutes that we're dealing with here. That wasn't okay. To be able to see that and to set aside all the other elements going on, because there was still, in the middle of the wickedness, there was a level of righteousness that needed to be brought forth. And in the process of doing that, do you see how shrewd he was? To be able to know that no mom is going to say, yeah, go ahead and cut my living child in half. But the one that wasn't the mom would be the first one to go, fine, she doesn't get him, I don't get him. I'm cool with that. Because you have to understand that when he's talking about here, to show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment, is he wanted him to understand how to think and how to be wise, and the same thing is going to be true with us. How to evaluate that which is going on around us. I mean, you think about it, that probably describes a lot of us with our kids periodically. And you're like, cut the dog in half. And they all like, all right. So that didn't work. Didn't work like I thought, But the reality is that we have to have that wisdom. Now, next thing. It says, there a fool's lips bring strife, and his mouth calls for blows. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are the snare of his soul. Now, I want you to think about this, because he's describing here what makes an individual a fool. He keeps coming back to this. And so this is such an important thing for us to get, because a person either has here, what we had up here, a man's or a person's words are deep water, the words of wisdom, or bubbling forth from him, or the other side, and that is that a fool's lips bring strife, his mouth calls for blows, a fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare for his soul. Guys, you've got two people, and the way that they handle what they say is the difference between being incredibly wise and a fool. And I want you to get a hold, it says a fool's lips bring strife and his mouth calls for blows. I mean, literally, if you've ever been in a situation where you just feel like you need to beat the fool out of somebody, that's what they're talking about. That's the concept, beat the fool out of somebody, because a fool's lips call for blows. And so he says his lips are a snare to his soul. He's trying to help them to understand, and it's something that we have to get a hold of. Sometimes we just feel like, they're just words. But the reality is they're not just words. They're a reflection of who we are. And so he wants us to understand the appropriateness of how we handle that, how we approach that. And it says this, the words are a whisper are like dainty morsels. They go down into the innermost parts of the body. Now, I thought this was kind of interesting, guys, because my mom always quoted to me the Matthew 12:34. I've told you that 1, 2, 3, 4, so easy to remember. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Or it basically shows who we are by what we say. All right. Now, my mom would always say that when I would say, "I didn't mean it, Mom," and she would quote that to me. Hated it, absolutely hated it. But she was right. And it's true. And what it was is a reflection of me. So what's interesting is when it says here, once again, when it says the words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, they go down in the innermost parts of the body, Solomon is trying to help his son understand a natural flaw that we all have. The flaw that we have toward a thing like slander and gossip. And it's talking about the words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels. It's like, oh, gosh, that's so good. Now, come on, let's be honest. It feels that way sometimes. You're hearing the dirt on somebody or something's going on, and there's something almost physically satisfying about doing that. And guys, that's not a good reflection of us, in case you were wondering. Now, I want you to think about, guys, this is the very basis for the success of reality TV. I mean, think about it. Some of the things like housewives of whatever. And it's like, how do they succeed? How does that work? And it's because of this very thing. There is this thing that's like, oh my gosh, she said to her, and then she said, girl, and all these things are happening, and you're like, wow. And it's almost like a car wreck or a train wreck. You should look away, but you just can't. All right? This is what he's talking about. And he's not saying that this is a good thing. He's identifying a thing that happens, again, through verbal stuff. Once again, listen to it. The words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, and they go down into the innermost parts of the body. He's trying to say this. So we're hearing slander and gossip and things that really aren't positive stuff, and we're taking all that in. And his point is to say to his son, and we need to hear it as well, that we think we just kind of hear it and slough it off. He said, no. It goes down into who we are. It has a negative effect on the character that we want to have. It becomes a part of us, goes down into our innermost being. He wants us to understand the significance of not just caring about what we say, but what we listen to. And so I want to challenge at all the locations, at home and here, guys, to really think about this, about the willingness to be able to look at somebody and go, oh, no, I don't need to hear that. No, thank you. To be able to do that, and because here's what happens. Not only do you get an opportunity when you do that to stop this very natural tendency we have to hear the dirt, all right, to hear whatever the thing is, but you also get an opportunity in the process of doing that with whoever you're dealing with to cause them to go, clearly that's something that they feel is negative or wrong, and you get an opportunity to witness a little bit about that's not what I want to be about. Now, guys, think about this. I don't know what goes on maybe at your job or your work. Think about what it's typically like in the office. Did you hear? And she said, and I understood that, and to be able to just go, oh, I don't need to hear that. Begins to call the world to see you a little bit differently. Who you are, what you stand for, what you want to be involved with. So I think it's interesting. He's talking over and over about what we say, what we talk about, and turns right around and also be careful what comes in these two. Watch out for the ears. Now, we're actually out of time, guys, but next week I want to start with verse 9. Listen to what it says in verse 9. I should go back here. Verse 9. It says, he who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. Now think about that. He's talking to his son. He's talking about someone not doing what they need to do and the danger that comes there. It's destructive to do all that. What I want to do is I want to take you through what we see in Proverbs about that concept, because we need to make sure that we get a chance to step forward and understand that concept of that honestly has made America great, but the concept of a work ethic and then translate that into the next generation. Guys, we want to remind you, hopefully more and more of you can be here on the weekend as you start feeling more comfortable or physically are able to do that, so we hope you'll be able to do that. We'll be doing all of our services this weekend, so make sure that you're here for that. If you are going to be at home, we're going to go ahead and do the 5:24 on Saturday afternoon and the 11:24 on Sunday. And so make sure that you're there for that if you want to do that live with us. And we'll continue to do that again for a while, but more and more we hope you'll be able to come back and be with us. So guys, thanks so much for being here again. It was great to see real faces. These guys have been great, but it's great to see real faces, and I hope to see you this weekend. Let's pray. Thanks, Father, so much for what you allow us to do. We thank you for how you direct and guide our lives. We do, again, continue to pray for our nation and for our leaders. We pray, Father, you help us to be a part of the answer. And I pray, Father, that as we continue to step forward, you'll provide protection. We do pray that you'll utilize everything we're seeing in a great way. You've promised that you'll take even negative stuff and you'll still use that. And so, Father, what the enemy is throwing at us individually and from our society standpoint and from a nation, I pray, Father, you'll use it in the lives of the people that lead us and guide us, and in our lives as well. Help us, Father, to be able to reach out to other people around us and to impact our sphere of influence. And thank you so much for all the people here at East and those watching online. I pray, Father, you'll help us to be the people you want us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you this weekend. Thank you guys for being here.